Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. We continue reading from the 40 Principles of the Religion, 40 Fundamentals of the Religion, Al-Arba Usul Din by Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, wa nafa'ana bi'um fi ad-darain, ameen, ameen, ameen. And we continue reading from the book on patience, As-Sabr, the fourth principle of the fourth quarter, meaning the 34th principle. And we read a few pages and we'll continue inshallah today, and we'll finish it today inshallah. The need for patience in all states. Know that the need for patience is generally for all states, because everything the slave encounters in his life is of only two categories. It either agrees with his desire or opposes it. If it agrees with his desire, like health and security, wealth and status, and many kinfolk, then how in need of patience with it he is. For if he does not control himself, he will exceed the bounds and let loose regarding luxury and following his desires, thus forgetting where he came from and his final destination, where we came from, who we are, and where we are heading. That's the name of a painting too, really. That's where I got it. If he agrees with his desire, like health and security, wealth and status, and many kinfolk, then how in need of patience with it he is. For if he does not control himself, he will exceed the bounds, transgress, and let loose regarding luxury and following his desires, thus forgetting where he came from and his final destination. Really, it's all about the final destination. And you cannot not reach there. It's like a train, if you will. You depart from point A, and there is only one other station, point B, and there are two doors, let's say, for the train on each side, and you cannot choose really the platform, the exit. It's not up to you this time. And one day you will be asked to leave the train and enter into that abode, that final destination. For this reason, the companions, radiallahu anhum, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them, said, "We were tested with the trial of hardship, and we were patient. And we were tested with the trial of ease, and we are not patient." Ease here basically sarra, okay, it's wealth, happiness, everything good. So they could not hold themselves. That is why it is said that every believer is patient with tribulation, but only the perpetually truthful one is patient with well-being. The meaning of patience with it is that a person does not depend upon it. He knows that it is all a trust under his care that must soon be returned. He does not become immersed in heedlessness and luxury, and he gives thanks for his blessings in the right manner. This is a subject whose explanation would be lengthy. The second category is whatever opposes desire, and that comprises four types. The first is acts of obedience. The ego is averse to some of these due to pure laziness, like the prayer, others due to stinginess, like zakah, almsgiving, the regular almsgiving, and others due to both of these, like hajj and jihad. Patience with obedience is an extremely difficult matter, and the obedient one needs patience in three states. Okay, again, the second category is whatever opposes desire, and that comprises four types. The first is acts of obedience. The ego is averse to some of these due to pure laziness, like the prayer, not praying at the beginning of the time slot, not really praying the sunnah before and after the prayer where applicable. Others due to stinginess, simply not willing to pay, though this is all the money, subhanallah, all your rizq, all your sustenance, or your wealth, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then when you are asked to pay 2.5% on cash money, gold, silver, once a year, lunar year, when you have, there are details, as you know, and then you refrain, or if you do it not wholeheartedly, and others due to both of these, like hajj and jihad, because in hajj you need to it's a form of obedience, but you need to spend. Patience and obedience is an extremely difficult matter, and the obedient one needs patience in three states. The first is during the first part of worship by correcting sincerity and having patience with the tarnishes of ostentation, Satan's machinations, and the machinations of the ego and its delusions. The second is during the deed itself, so as not to slack on properly performing it with its requirements and recommended aspects, all of which is conditional upon etiquette, presence of heart, and absence of whisperings. The third is after finishing, which is that a person is patient regarding his remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not raising his voice with it to show off ostentatiously for the sake of reputation. All of the aforementioned are among the acts of patience that are difficult upon the ego. Second type is acts of disobedience. The Prophet ﷺ said, "The fighter is he who fights his desire, and the immigrant is he who immigrates from evil." Having patience with acts of disobedience is more difficult, especially with the act of disobedience that has become a very familiar habit, for two forces are at odds with religious motivation: the force of desire and the force of habit. If easiness and little burden are added to this, then none can be patient with it except for the perpetually truthful. This is like the disobedience of the tongue. For indeed it is simple and easy, like backbiting, lying, arguing, and praising oneself. Well, I guess lying in particular, especially when we talk about some politicians, some journalists, some spin doctors, changing narratives, whitewashing history, justifying injustice, justifying unbridled carnage, justifying bombing hospitals, bakeries, solar panels, ambulances, but above all, babies. And then you'll find people who lie. The dehumanization. To combat this, a person needs to have the most extreme form of patience. The third type is that which is not connected to the slave's choice. However, he has a choice in repelling it or rectifying it, like the one who is affected by an undesirable thing coming from someone else, by either his hand or his tongue. Having patience with this form by foregoing retribution is sometimes obligatory and sometimes recommended. Some of the companions, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them, said, "We did not consider a man's faith to be true faith unless he was patient when harmed." Oh, how many stories, real, that first-hand knowledge about Muslims being harmed and forgiving at the same time, immediately. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, informing us of the statement of the prophets, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, informing us of the statement of the prophets, وَلْنَصْبِرَنَّ عَلَى مَا آذَيْتُمُونَ وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُتَوَكِّلُونَ. We will indeed be patient with the harm you have done to us, and let those who rely in truth rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَنَصْبِرَنَّ عَلَى مَا آذَيْتُمُونَ. No prophet ever, of course, no more prophets, that's it. Islam is the final phase of revelation. Prophet said, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the final prophet, the seal of the prophets. And I remember once I was giving a lecture at the Tantur Ecumenical Institute, just between south of Jerusalem, immediately before almost between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And it was a group of priests and maybe sisters, nuns, and one of them was Australian. And he said, it's true, since no prophet, of course when we say no prophet, we mean like the biblical prophets, no prophet since Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came about. No prophet was ever accepted with open arms by his community, always persecution, always rejection. And some of those prophets, as the Quran tells us, paid with their lives. وَنَصْبِرَنَّ عَلَى مَا آذَيْتُمُونَ. Will indeed be patient with the harm you have done to us. And one would question, isn't it enough? More than 200 years of colonialism, of settler colonialism. The third world have had enough of this. We will indeed be patient with the harm you have done to us. Usurping the resources, trapping these third world countries with loans that they will never be able to pay the debt, the interest. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَدَعْ أَذَاهُمْ وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Leave repaying their harm and rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّكَ يَضِيقُ صَدْرُكَ بِمَا يَقُولُونَ فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَكُن مِّنَ السَّاجِدِينَ. Indeed, we know that your chest is strained by what they say. So glorify your Lord with praise and be among those who prostrate. In fact, we are the only, if you talk about the Muslim community at large, the Ummah, we are the only Ummah who continue to prostrate. If one reads in the Old Testament, the phrase, and he fell on his face, that is sujood. The fourth type is whatever is not by choice from start to finish, like the death of loved ones, loss of wealth, sickness, losing a limb, and all other kinds of tribulation. Having patience with these is from the loftiest of stations. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma said, patience in the Quran is upon three stations. Patience with fulfilling requirements, which has 300 degrees. And patience with tribulation, when it first befalls. إنما الصبر عند الصدمة الأولى. Indeed, patience is when at the moment of when tragedy hits. Immediately. Patience with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's prohibitions, which has 600 degrees, and patience with tribulation when it first befalls. Which has 700 degrees. The Prophet ﷺ said, this hadith has weak chain of narrators, but we read it anyhow, and the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if I try my slave, this would be hadith Qudsi, Allah speaking in the first person singular, if I try my slave with the tribulation of sickness, and he is patient and does not complain to his visitors, I will replace his flesh with a flesh better than it, and his blood with blood better than it. If I cause him to recover, I cause him to recover, and he has no sins. If I cause him to die, is unto my mercy. We rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so on His mercy, but we still need to do the right thing. He said, informing us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I direct a slave among my slaves an affliction in his body, wealth, or children, and he faces it with beautiful patience, on the day of resurrection I will be shy about placing his deeds on a scale or opening up his record. Again, it's a weak chain of narrators that has beautiful meanings. The Prophet ﷺ said patiently again, all forms of this hadith have weak chains of narrators. Patiently waiting for relief is an act of worship. And also a different wording after tribulation, after hardship, but all of them have weak chains of narrators. He also said, among the affairs that entail magnifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, glorifying and knowing His right, is that you do not complain about your pain and do not mention your affliction. Thus you know that you are not free of need for patience in all of your states. Through this, it is apparent that patience is a pillar of faith. Faith's other pillar that relates to action or actions is gratitude. The next, basically the fifth principle, which will be the subject of tomorrow, inshallah. The Prophet ﷺ said, faith is divided into two. We have dealt with this before. Remember, as I mentioned this, and also it has weak general weak chain of narrators, except some said that it is mawquf, some said that it is marfu'. Faith is divided in two, half is patience and half is gratitude. This statement is understood by considering actions as faith and referring to them as such. There's I just wanted to go back to just a comment on the second type is acts of disobedience. The Prophet ﷺ said, the fighter is he who fights his desire. Al-Mujahid man jahid hawa. And the immigrant is he who immigrates from evil. Of course, first of all, this hadith comprises two really parts. Each one of them is a different hadith. Both have good chains of narrators. Al-Mujahid man jahid, that's An-Nasa'i. Al-Muhajir man hajar as-su', that's Ibn Majah, like the compendia. So both of them have good chains of narrators. They are two different traditions. Now, the fighter is Mujahid. The struggler would be, if you would like to, that's more accurate. Even in the second one, the immigrant is he who immigrates from evil. That's fine. But really, hajara abandons. Evil, that's fine. Abandons, sin, abandons everything that is really bad. Al-Muhajiru man hajara. In this case, it's the migration is it's a spatial really movement from point A to point B, seeking safety, security, and in the second sense, it's really spiritual. Hajar as-Su, that's a spiritual movement, moving from one state to another. So until tomorrow, inshallah, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.